Okay, Kinesiology 223. This is chapter 24, still talking about aggression in sport. This is presentation number 2. We're on page 601. Now, the book talks about these 4 theories that psychologists have historically kind of advanced regarding the causes of aggression. It'll be the instinct of the person, how they're wired, frustration in terms of the relationship that you have when you're playing against somebody, or the sport environment itself, social learning, what they've learned from media, the parents, their family, friends, etc., and a revised frustration aggression theory that we'll talk about in a second. All right. Oh, sorry. Cruising through here. There it is. With instinct theory, and you oftentimes will hear that people are just kind of pre-wired to be more aggressive than others. The book provides that people have an innate instinct to be aggressive that builds up until it is inevitably expressed. Now, the way the book presents this is they talk about you have people who are predisposed to be aggressive, and then they utilize sport as a way to blow off some of that aggressiveness, and that is referred to as catharsis. Now, I will tell you, if you're coaching a sport, especially like a combative sport or other sports that, like I mentioned before, even volleyball, right? You're not really tackling your opponent, but you're spanking a ball at the other person. To a certain degree, the person isn't so much seeking out a sport for catharsis, although that might be part of it, to blow off aggression. When they're in the context of competing and they're playing against an opponent, they may find that because of their wiring, they're predisposed to being more aggressive. And as a coach, you have to find ways to kind of talk your athletes off the ledge, and you have to have a catharsis type of mindset, um, even from play to play to play. So the book presents this in terms of it's like a socially acceptable means, such as sport, to blow off some of that aggressiveness. I will tell you that in the ebb and flow of a competitive event, there are times where you have to tell your athlete, hey, I need you to back it down a little bit, narrow your focus in on what you're trying to accomplish here, and don't be taken out of your game by the opponent. So that ends up being a case where you have to talk them through to back off the aggression that they're experiencing as a result of their interaction with the other player. When I mentioned it before, oftentimes like that negative behavior that you have, the negative aggressiveness, comes from the interactions against another player. Positive aggressiveness is just, in some regards, a byproduct of the sport. So they refer to this as catharsis. Now, if we go ahead and move on to the next one, yep, there we go. Frustration aggression theory. This states that aggression is the result of frustration that occurs because of calls, a blocked goal. It's also referred to sometimes as drive theory. The book notes this. It just states that it's a direct result of frustration that occurs of a not a blockage of a goal, like you're kicking a ball into a soccer goal, but you have a goal in mind and something you want to achieve, and there's a blockage or a roadblock in your way, or there's a failure in the process to achieve your goals. I will say this, when you start talking about like goal blockage and goals within the context of playing a sport, you don't really think of it in terms of my goal is to get around this person, my goal is to block this person, my goal is to tackle this person. But there's little goals that you have when you're playing in a match or a game with the intent of leading towards the bigger goal of winning. And with within the context here, they talk about some of the frustrations that you have with athletes, and many times athletes getting away with illegal play against an opponent. The opponent becomes frustrated as a result because there's a non-call, or what ends up happening is, like, there's a wonderfully famous example of this young lady that was caught on social media, soccer player, and she was a bully. She would go out and play, college level soccer player, and she would yank the ponytails of her opponents when she was playing against them and kind of take them out of position, causing like neck injury to several other players. And she had done this for quite some time, and it wasn't until social media uh, there was a video of her that made its way around social media that caught her yanking the ponytail of an opposing player, that she was caught. Now, one can imagine how long she had gotten away with that and that type of illegal play against other soccer players until she was finally outed on social media. And I believe her scholarship, I believe, was pulled, if I remember correctly. So what ends up happening there is you have this kind of retaliatory process where the opposing player might get up off the ground after having their neck yanked because of their ponytail, or neck blown out because of their ponytail being yanked. They get up and they punch the other person in the nose, and they end up getting the call. So long story short, the book gets into this kind of frustration aggression theory, and they believe that the frustration is a manifestation of blockage. It's a blockage towards a person's goal, however small it might be on the field or big. Now, I would say that when you're playing against other people in a field of play, or you're on a court, you're going to have athletes who are going to become frustrated. They are highly driven. They want to achieve. They want to score goals. They want to block their opponent. And so what ends up happening is, because they are having difficulty doing so, and they haven't figured out the right combination to win in that one-on-one against their opponent. And let's face it, when you play basketball, if you're a guard, you're probably playing defense against the other team's guard. In football, for an entire hour, you're matched up against another person across the line from you, or as a receiver, you're lined up against the defensive back for the entire game. You get to know the other person, as I stated earlier. And you can let this be a cascading series of events that allows you to become frustrated, and you become more aggressive, and then it becomes no longer the aggression that's associated with the actual sport itself. It becomes more behavioral in origin, and then you end up having this behavioral manifestation of aggression. So what they talk about in the book is, with this, they talk about how little evidence shows that frustrated athletes lower their levels of aggression by participating in contact sports. I would agree with that. I would say, to a certain degree, you have contact sports themselves have an aggressive nature to them, and it's not like people are blowing off or finding catharsis from tackling another person, although it is damn fun, let me tell you. But with the theory itself, it maintains that frustration always causes aggression, and that's generally dismissed today as well. So what you're seeing is a theory that was great on the initial front end. It was kind of widely accepted. It's kind of dismissed now in this regard. But I will say this, if you frame it up in terms of how frustration can manifest itself into a negative behavior or maladaptive behavior, it becomes a matter of, okay, how do you as a coach get your athletes to not have that maladaptive behavior? All right. Social learning theory. Aggression is a learned behavior by observing others. The behavior receives reinforcement from others, which offer incentives for the continued use of the behavior. And they talk about that violence in the media has a sizable amount of influence. And I would tell you that, and I would agree that there's a sizable amount of violence in media. It's just part of what we watch on TV, whether it's regular network TV or movies, cable, Netflix, whatever it may be. And what they talk about is different correlations that that tie into, like in here, they talk about with correlations exceeding those of homework and academic achievement. So the idea that I think they're trying to get across here is, consistent with the tenets of social learning theory, researchers have also convincingly demonstrated that the observation of media violence is positively related to aggression, with correlations exceeding those of homework and academic achievement, passive smoking and lung cancer, and condom use and sexually transmitted human immunodeficiency virus. I think what they're trying to show is that the correlation between the media seen on TV has a tighter correlation to exhibited violence or aggression on the field of play than any of these other medical conditions that you have down here, like condom use and sexually transmitted disease, and passive smoking and lung cancer. So they're really trying to push the agenda that violence is a manifestation of what we see on TV, and perhaps there is some validity to that. But it's also environmental in terms of where where we learn how to play a particular game. If we look at this, they talk about these different hockey leagues, and they talk about how aggressive behavior in professional hockey, they talk about penalty records from 200 games, and they found that North American-born hockey players committed more aggressive acts than European-born players. And this becomes an important finding, they state, because it's not like hockey's homogenous, right? So here in the United States, hockey's taught in a way that's very physical and aggressive in nature, where in Europe, the aggressiveness and the physicality is not as high, and it's a more of a finesse-oriented game, if you will. And so what you see is overall, you have social learning that happens within two completely different geographic regions, two different leagues that play hockey. And then when they come together, they were able to take these data points in 2007 to figure out that the modeling and the coaching that's provided in Europe is different than the modeling and the coaching that's provided in the United States, and it manifests itself in terms of penalty minutes seen in U.S. players versus players in Europe. All right, so moving on, social learning, and we're going to jump into, I'll let you pause this to read through some of the results here, and jumping into revised frustration aggression theory. This is also referred to as cognitive neo-association theory. It combines elements of the original frustration aggression hypothesis with social learning theory. According to this view, although frustration does not always lead to aggression, it increases the likelihood of aggression by increasing arousal, anger, and other thoughts and emotions. However, increased arousal and anger result in aggression only when socially learned cues signal the appropriateness of this. If the socially learned cues signal that aggression is inappropriate, it will not result. So if an athlete has been rewarded and been given social cues regarding aggression, it is more likely that they will exhibit an aggressive type of behavior. If the social cues and the reward system is not there, they won't exhibit the aggressive-like behavior. That's really what we're getting at if we were to kind of distill that down. General aggression model. For example, although it's been found that the frustration certainly increases the likelihood of aggression, it is only one situational cause. A variety of personal factors, beliefs, and attitudes, meaning situational factors, itself can also be a contributing factor. So, it's this kind of the overall, it's this theory of overall aggressiveness in the environment. One could imagine going to a hostile environment and playing against a team in their home environment. It's very hostile, and the fans are hostile, and it increases the overall likelihood of aggressiveness that you would exhibit as a player. They talk about this aggressive process and here in figure 24.1, maybe take a moment to look at that in the book. You have to have some sort of input in terms of aggressiveness, right? And then they talk about both personal and situational factors and their unique interaction determine one's propensity to behave aggressively. So I would agree that's a little bit of nature and nurture. There's no doubt about it. The personality is key, but it's how they're coached. It's if they're a task-oriented athlete or an outcome-oriented athlete, do they have a strong ego or a poor ego? These are the things that will determine the likelihood of aggressive behavior. So aggression occurs as a result of like a complexity of different things. And it goes through the filter of the athlete's own thoughts, but also, I say it all the time as a coach, you can perhaps find ways to give your athletes interventions in practice and in play to be able to take them out of a negative aggressive mindset and be able to have them redirect their energies to be, of course, aggressive in the moment, but aggressive within the context of the field of play and the rules itself. But the takeaway that you have down here is, sure, it's these numerous personal factors, but I'm just going to stress it again. You have to be able to find ways to offer coping skills for your athletes. All right, signing off.